What do you do when you watch your wife kiss her ex in a hotel hallway on a security screen and everyone around you says you are the problem? How far can you go, using only the law and cold facts, when your own family believes her story over what is recorded in motion and timestamped? Why did the moment I pressed save clip matter more than the moment she pressed her lips on him? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Corin, and the night everything began to slide out of place did not look dramatic at first. It looked like overcooked pasta and a kitchen too quiet for a family of 3. I stood at the stove stirring sauce that had already lost its bite, listening to the soft clicks of Maera's phone on the counter beside her plate. She scrolled with a small smile that did not include me, her thumb moving quickly, her eyes lighting up in a way they used to when she talked with me about new trips or silly ideas. I asked how late her work event at the hotel would go, and she answered in a casual tone that it was just networking, nothing serious, a little rooftop bar gathering with partners and old friends from her travel jobs. She added that she needed one night to relax without me checking the time. The words landed like a gentle slap, not hard enough to break skin, but sharp enough to leave a mark. I watched her push food around her plate and talk about drink tickets, while our son Ilias tried to tell her about a drawing he made at school. She nodded without really looking up, and I caught his face fall for a second before he forced another smile. Later, in the bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed, while she moved from mirror to wardrobe and back again, changing dresses and heels with a practiced rhythm that reminded me of our early dates. I told her she looked beautiful, and she replied that I always said that even when I did not mean it, then added that her colleagues already thought I was a bit intense. She said they believed I did not trust her and that she did not want another scene. The word scene felt unfair, because I had never yelled or broken anything. I had only asked questions about late nights and sudden trips with old friends, but I had learned that in her story, my calm questions counted as drama. She brushed off my suggestion that I could come with her, saying it was a work thing, not a couple's outing, and that me hovering would send the wrong message. When she slipped into a tight dress that hugged her in all the ways that used to be for me alone, I swallowed my comment and only asked if she would text when she arrived. She told me she would, as long as I did not act like a tracking app. In the stairwell outside our apartment, our voices dropped without planning it. I reminded her that Ilias had asked if we could all go somewhere together again, and she answered that I was putting pressure on her and killing the mood before she even reached the hotel. She said her coworkers thought I did not let her breathe, and that maybe I should think about how that looked from the outside. I stood there with the cold rail under my hand and realized how easily she had moved the weight from her choices to my shoulders. When she left, the air on the landing felt strangely empty, like a room after someone blows out candles. Back inside, I found Ilias in the living room building a crooked tower of blocks. He asked why we did not go with Mommy, and I told him she had a grown-up work party. He asked if they had balloons, and I lied and said I did not know. After I put him to bed, I sat at my small desk in the corner and opened my laptop. A spreadsheet blinked back at me, full of small initials and dates and short, calm notes about late returns, strange messages, and sudden changes in mood. I had started it months before, when I felt something shift but could not name it, because numbers and lines helped me think more clearly than raised voices ever could. I added another row for that evening, listing the hotel name and the time she left, and then minimized the file when my phone vibrated with a message from my sister, Celine. She asked if everything was okay, because she said she had not heard my usual boring weekend updates. I told her things were fine, just busy, and she replied that I should remember I did not have to accept being disrespected just to keep the peace. Her words sat at the edge of my thoughts as I opened my calendar and, almost without thinking, created a small reminder for later in the week titled Riverside 10:30 a.m. I did not decide what that meeting was yet, but I knew I might need a quiet place to talk to someone who understood rules and options. Once the reminder was set, I walked back to the hallway where Maera's shoes were still lined up near the door like a row of soldiers. I picked up her lighter pair and put them back carefully, noticing how empty the space felt without her presence. I turned off the main light and checked my phone one more time. Just then, as if in answer, her phone lit up on the console table where she had left it by mistake. The lock screen flashed with a new message from a contact saved under only a small camera emoji, no name. I saw the preview show a short line about how the evening would be fun now that she was free, and before I could read more, the screen went dark again. When I picked it up, the thread title at the top of her messages shifted as a new notification came in, and the conversation she had been laughing at during dinner slipped down the list. A different thread called Follow Up appeared for a second, then vanished again as the screen locked itself. At the same moment, I heard the apartment door latch click from my hand as I shut it fully, the sound sharp in the quiet hallway, and I stood there with the phone's glow fading, feeling something in me lock as well. The decision to go to the hotel myself did not feel like a big move at first. It felt like a man trying to quiet his own mind. I told myself I just wanted to see that everything really was as harmless as she said, that the rooftop bar was only a noisy place full of colleagues and harmless jokes. I left Ilyas with my neighbor for an hour, saying I had an errand near the city center, and drove with the radio off so I could listen to my own thoughts. When I entered the hotel lobby, the first thing I noticed was the wide security desk, with a wall of monitors showing elevators, hallways, and the shining doors of the rooftop level. The guard glanced at me with the bored look of someone who has seen too many nights like this. I took the elevator up, feeling the soft hum under my shoes, and stepped into the bright music and laughter of the rooftop bar. There she was, by the rail, with a drink in her hand and her head tilted back in a laugh that seemed bigger than I remembered. Jack stood beside her, his hand resting at the small of her back in a way that claimed familiarity. Lena and a few others from her office formed a loose circle around them, and when Maera saw me, her smile froze for a heartbeat before she turned it into something polite and distant. She introduced me to a few people in a tone that suggested she had just remembered I existed, adding that I was the serious one who always worried. I felt eyes on me, measuring the man she had described in their stories. I tried to talk with her at the bar counter, but she told me I was making her look bad by hovering, that her colleagues thought I did not trust her, that she just wanted one night where I did not count her drinks. Her words were smooth, practiced, framed as my flaw and not her choice. Jax clinked a glass against hers and joked that she deserved fun, and she leaned against him with a light touch that looked innocent if you did not know the history between them. I watched her dance in a tight circle with him and Lena, their bodies moving close in the low light, and felt the familiar urge to pull her aside and demand some basic respect. Instead, I remembered Seleni's warning about giving people more scenes to use against me. I put my empty glass on the bar, told Maera quietly that I was heading home and that she could text me when she was safe, and walked toward the elevator. She waved without really looking at me, already turning back to Jax. In the quieter air of the lower lobby, the music became a dull pulse above my head. I paused near the security desk, pretending to check my phone for messages about Ilyas, and saw on one of the monitors a hallway outside the elevators on a higher floor. The guard grumbled to a colleague about noise and people knocking on doors, and I heard the faint echo over his radio. I asked in a calm and normal tone if there had been any trouble on my wife's floor, explaining that she was at the company event. He shrugged and said there had been some drunken noise earlier and that sometimes people forgot this was still a hotel and not a club. When I gave him the floor and approximate time, he rolled back the footage on one screen with bored fingers. We watched a few minutes of people stumbling out of elevators, laughing and weaving their way down the hall. Then the image changed. There was Maera, leaning against the wall near the elevator doors, her heels slightly crooked, her head tipped to one side in a way I knew meant she was very drunk or very playful, or both. Jack stepped out of the elevator with her, steadying her with a hand at her waist. She laughed, said something I could not hear, and then she reached up and pulled his face down to hers. On the screen, it was clear and slow, not a brief misunderstanding or clumsy stumble, but a deliberate act. She kissed him like someone who had wanted to do it for a long time and now felt free to. His arm tightened around her, and they stayed close until another couple walked around the corner and they separated, both laughing. I felt the air in my chest turn cold. I did not shout, did not pound the desk, did not accuse the guard of anything. I asked instead if the system kept recordings in case guests lost things or something bad happened, and he nodded, saying they kept them for a while and could help if there was a problem with a bill or a complaint. I thanked him and walked away, my step steady, my mind already arranging times, images, and dates in the same quiet grid I used for work. On my phone screen, a muted notification flashed from a calendar entry labeled Meeting Personal, reminding me of something I had not even scheduled yet, but now knew I would. Upstairs, in the bar I had just left, a group chat on Maera's phone began to fill with new messages about a joke kiss and a jealous husband who could not relax. Down here, near the cool light of security cameras and the soft chime of the elevator, the bell rang as the doors opened on the same hallway I had just watched on the screen, and I understood that I had just seen the moment my marriage crossed a line that would never move back. The first workday after the hotel night felt strangely bright, as if the sun had not received the news that something had broken in my life and refused to dim itself out of respect. I walked into the open plan office with my usual coffee in hand, nodded to the receptionist, and tried to move like a man who had slept well and trusted his home. My desk sat near the middle of the floor, surrounded by soft conversations, clicking keyboards, and the constant murmur of air conditioning. On a normal morning, this sound made me feel calm. On that morning, every whisper felt like it might be about me. I logged into my system, opened the logistics dashboard, and let numbers and rotes fill my screen. The routine steadied my breathing. As I worked, I noticed small changes. A pair of colleagues from the finance row looked at me, then lowered their voices. A younger analyst who usually asked me for help with scripts quickly closed a browser tab when I passed behind him. I caught only a fragment of his screen, but the words rooftop and hallway flashed before it went dark. I knew then that the story had already traveled faster than I had. My manager Rose sent a short message asking if I had 5 minutes for a quick chat. I walked to his small office, closed the glass door behind me, and sat in the chair opposite his desk. He leaned forward with his hands folded, his face careful in a way that told me he had already decided to treat me like a fragile item. He said he had heard there was some kind of incident at a hotel event where alcohol and emotions were involved. He said that, as far as he knew, nothing illegal had happened, but he wanted to make sure that my personal life would not spill into client relationships or team meetings. I told him that I understood, that I was dealing with a private issue, and that I would keep my work performance stable. I added that I had never raised my voice or made a scene, only tried to understand what had happened. He seemed relieved at my calm, but I could see that he still placed my situation in the category of domestic drama, something messy and slightly embarrassing, not something rooted in cold images and timestamps. When I returned to my desk, a new small key on my ring tapped against the edge of the table. I had added that key 2 nights before for the drawer where I kept printed statements and private notes. I rolled it between my fingers for a moment, then opened my computer's file manager. On the desktop, 2 clean folders sat side by side, labeled Archive A and Archive B. Inside them, I had started to sort photos, exported chat logs, and small voice memos by date instead of by event. There was no lawyer's name on any file, no court number, nothing that could be called a legal document yet. They were just pieces of a story I might one day be forced to tell in a room full of strangers. While I was moving a copy of the hallway video into one of those folders, a small pop-up appeared in the corner of my screen, saying that the file had been uploaded successfully to my cloud account. I watched the words for a moment. Knowing the video now lived in more than one place made my shoulders drop a little. If my phone was lost or broken or accidentally wiped, the hallway would still exist somewhere else. Around midday, my sister Selene messaged me again, asking if she could meet me near my office for a quick lunch. We sat on a bench outside a sandwich shop, her in her nurse scrubs, me in my plain office clothes, looking like 2 people talking about something normal. She spoke in her usual careful way, saying she had already seen some comments from people who knew Maera through mutual friends. She said the story going around painted me as a jealous husband who had tried to drag hotel staff into a personal argument, while my wife was described as a fun, free woman trapped in a controlling marriage. I told Celine that the camera footage showed something else, described what I'd seen on the monitor in calm, measured words. I said I had not shouted or demanded anything, I had just watched. She listened and then said that facts always moved more slowly than gossip, but they still moved. She reminded me again that preparing to protect my life and my child did not make me petty or cruel. It made me responsible. When I went back inside, I noticed that more people had heard some version of the rooftop story. A pair of coworkers lowered their voices when I passed the break room, and one of them made a comment about men who cannot handle their wives having fun. I did not correct them. I returned to my seat, opened my routes again, and added one more note to my private spreadsheet. Later that evening, after finishing my shift, I stopped at the supermarket on the way home to pick up some basic things for dinner. The bright aisles and soft music felt strange after the whispered tension of the office. As I loaded bread, milk, and fruit into my basket, I tried to imagine how I would talk to Ilias about anything if this continued. In the checkout line, I placed my items on the belt and stared at the small digital numbers as they moved. A familiar voice behind me said my name with fake surprise. I turned and saw Lena, dressed in casual clothes, flanked by 2 colleagues from Maera's office. Their faces held the kind of excitement people get when they approach a story they have enjoyed retelling. Lena asked if I had recovered from the hotel night and said that the whole floor had been laughing about how dramatic things had gotten in the hallway. She spoke in an amused tone, as if the kiss I had watched on that gray monitor was a scene from a comedy instead of the moment the marriage promise between us snapped. One of her friends pulled out a phone and opened a group chat, where a short, shaky video looped. Someone had recorded the security monitor with their own device, catching a blurred version of Maera and Jax in the hallway, bodies pressed close near the elevator doors. The quality was low, but even in that poor clip, I recognized the way she reached up and pulled him in. Lena said that, in their version, it was just a drunk, harmless kiss, and that the real problem was how angry and cold I had looked when I left. She repeated Maera's line that I made her feel watched. I did not correct any of them. I simply asked what they had heard, noted the details, and stored them quietly in my mind. When it was my turn to pay, the cashier started scanning items while the group chat on Lena's phone pinged over and over. Little message bubbles rolling in with laughing faces and comments about loyalty, drama, and old lovers. The sound of those rapid notifications felt like shallow applause for the wrong performance. I took my bag, nodded once, and walked out to the parking lot, my pulse steady even as my jaw clenched. In the car, I opened my phone and typed a single line into the follow-up thread. Keep everything. As I set the device down, another ping came from the group chat behind me inside the store, and Lena's laughter carried faintly through the automatic doors, the blurred monitor clip playing again in their small circle while I sat in the darkening lot, thinking about how truth and noise were now racing each other. A few days later, the story moved from offices and supermarkets into the space that hurt most, family. Maera suggested we go to a family restaurant for a joint birthday dinner for her father Eldrick and her mother Petra. She said it would be a chance to show we were united, that if I could just behave normally for one evening, people would stop talking. The invitation felt less like an olive branch and more like a stage direction, but I agreed to go because I did not want to give anyone more easy lines to use against me. The restaurant was busy and warm, with a long table set for the Linwood family and a few close friends. When I arrived, I saw Petra and Maera already seated at one end, deep in conversation. Their voices dropped when I came near. Eldrick stood, clapped me on the shoulder, and made a polite comment about work, as if nothing else sat between us. I sat across from Maera so I could watch her without staring too directly, and I greeted everyone with the same calm tone I used at the office. It did not take long for the hotel night to appear in the air like smoke. Petra mentioned in a loud enough voice that some people did not know how to relax and always turned little things into tragedies. Maera laughed lightly and said that sometimes people could be so jealous that they imagined betrayal everywhere, even when nothing serious had happened. She explained to the table that she had been drunk, that an old friend had leaned in too close, and that someone had overreacted and bothered hotel staff. She did not mention that she had been the one to grab that old friend and kiss him. She did not mention the monitor. She framed it all as my failure to be fun. I felt eyes turn to me, looking not for my pain, but for signs that I might explode. Instead of arguing, I focused on small physical details to keep steady. The edge of the napkin beneath my fingers, the pattern of flowers on the plates, the faint vibration of my phone in my pocket. Under the table, I unlocked the screen for a second and saw the thumbnail of the hallway video. One frame showed Maera's hand on Jax's neck, pulling him down. I did not open it. I locked the phone again and placed it screen down. Eldrick asked in a lower voice if I could not find it in my heart to forgive a silly drunk mistake. He said everyone did foolish things sometimes, and that a strong husband knew when to look the other way for the sake of the family. I told him, quietly, that my concern was not one night or one kiss, but the way the story about that kiss had been twisted into an attack on my character. I said I was worried about what that meant for Elias, who would eventually hear more than he should. Eldrick frowned and told me not to bring the child into adult matters, while Petra shot me a sharp look and said that if I cared so much about our son, I would stop trying to punish his mother. The dessert menus arrived, and people tried to change the subject, but the air around us stayed heavy. On my way to the restroom, I passed a small planner pinned to the restaurant's wall near the staff station. A bright red circle marked a date later that month, with only 3 initials written next to it. The image caught my eye because it matched a similar red circle I had drawn on our home calendar for a future meeting, one I had quietly labeled only with a time and place. I stood there for a moment, thinking about how people like to claim certain days for themselves, like they own time just because they drew a circle around it. After dinner, the group drifted outside. Next to the parking lot, there was a small park playground, mostly empty except for a few children finishing their games before bedtime. Ilyas pulled at my hand and asked if we could go to the swings. I agreed, grateful for a task that did not involve managing adult lies. As I pushed him gently, he leaned back and watched the sky. After a few minutes, he asked in a small voice why everyone said that I had made his mother kiss another man. He said he had heard Petra telling someone that if I had not been so cold, Mommy would not have done anything silly. The words hit me harder than anything Zed at the table. For a moment, I forgot to push, and the swing slowed. I started again, keeping my hand steady on the chains while I chose my answer. I told him that adults sometimes said things that were not fair when they were hurt or scared, and that none of this was his fault. I did not name anyone or show him proof. I only told him that I loved him and that I would always tell him the truth when he was old enough to ask for it. While we spoke, my phone vibrated in my pocket. When I took it out to silence it, I saw that the screen showed a muted call from a number labeled only as private. At the same moment, I noticed Petra walking toward us along the edge of the playground, her arms crossed, her jaw tight. The call kept lighting my phone in my hand as she approached the swing set and said that we needed to talk about what would happen with Ilyas if I kept creating tension. And for the first time, I understood that the hotel hallway was no longer just between me and Maera. It was now a weapon held over my role as a father. The next days moved with a strange double rhythm, part normal routine and part quiet preparation, like music played over the sound of a machine starting up in another room. On the surface, life went on. I still woke, made breakfast, checked school bags, and reminded Ilyas to put his shoes on the right feet. I still walked to the bus, sat at my desk, and answered emails. Underneath, something else was forming, built out of dates, recordings, and small objects placed in careful places. After the talk with Petra at the playground, I understood that they were ready to turn the hotel hallway into a story where I was the villain who pushed a poor woman into a mistake. I realized then that emotions alone would not protect me and that simple truth spoken at tables would not win against louder voices. I needed more than my hurt. I needed structure. I started sleeping in the guest bed. The first night, I changed the sheets and noticed they were slightly creased, like someone had lain there for a short time before I returned home on a late shift the week before. I did not ask Maera about it. I told her calmly that I felt we both needed space to cool down and that separate beds would help us avoid useless arguments. She replied that it suited her just fine and said she was tired of feeling watched in her own home. Her tone suggested that I had been the one pushing my presence on her, not the one watching her leave our son at home to chase old sparks. In the kitchen, our mugs began to live on opposite counters. Her favorite cup sat near the window, next to her phone charger and a stack of beauty magazines. Mine sat near the fridge, close to the small desk where I kept my laptop. One evening, when she was out late again for another work mixer, I opened the desk drawer and laid everything out. There was a binder labeled Home, another called Auto, and a third called Bank. These had always existed, holding basic bills and records. Now I added a new, slightly thicker folder and named it Household. Inside it, I slid printed screenshots of messages, copies of bank statements showing hotel charges that did not match her stories, and a few simple notes about what I had seen and heard. Each page had only the date and a short line in my handwriting. There were no accusations, only descriptions. Along the side of the drawer, I taped a small USB stick labeled only with the current date. It held copies of the hallway video, the shaky supermarket clip from Lena's group chat, and the audio from 2 short conversations I had recorded when people forgot I was present. I did not yet know who would ever need to see these things, but I knew they had to survive even if someone decided to erase my devices. Once the drawer was full, I closed it and turned the small key in the lock. The quiet click felt like closing a lid on something waiting for another day. In this period, Maera started staying later at the office. One afternoon, I drove to pick her up because I needed to talk with her about school plans for Ilyas. I parked in the underground garage beneath her building and waited near the stairwell with my hands in my pockets. The concrete smelled of oil and cold air. After a while, I saw her and Jax walking toward their cars, their steps a little loose, their voices light. They did not see me at first. I heard her say that her husband would never let this go, and that he was planning something with all his little notes and files. Jax laughed and told her I sounded like one of those men who think they are in a detective movie, watching shadows instead of living their life. She complained that I made her feel like she lived under a camera, then added that the kiss had only become a problem because I was boring enough to make it one. I stood behind a concrete column, my phone in my hand, headphones looped over my ears. To anyone watching, I was just a man listening to music. In truth, I had opened the recording app before they turned the corner, and the faint beep had been lost under the sound of an engine starting somewhere else. Their words went straight into my file of facts. When they finally noticed me, Maera acted surprised and slightly annoyed, asking why I had come, and if I did not trust her to make it home on her own. I simply said that we needed to talk about parent-teacher meetings and that I had been nearby. She shrugged and told me she already had plans for the evening with friends and that any talk could wait. She left with Jax's hand briefly touching her shoulder in that same familiar way. I drove home alone, my phone resting face up beside the gear stick, the recording saved with only the date and the initials of the parking garage. That night, after putting Ilyas to bed, I sat with my laptop at the kitchen desk and opened my calendar. I created an alarm for the following week, labeled Paper Drop, and set it for early morning. I did not yet have the papers. I did not even have an appointment, but I knew I would. I also edited one of my upcoming reminders, changing it to read Old Port 11:15 a.m. follow-up. It referred to a quiet cafe near the water, a place with small tables and no loud music. I chose it because it felt neutral, because it was not tied to any memory of Maera and me. A few days later, I went there alone and sat with a notebook, writing out a clear timeline of events in calm handwriting. I did not need to put everything in my head in front of anyone yet, but I needed to see it all in one neat line. I noted the start of the distance, the first late nights, the hallway footage, the supermarket clip, the birthday dinner, the swing set question, and the parking garage words. Seeing them all together made one thing completely clear. If I walked into any room in the future with only my emotions, I would lose. If I walked in with these dates and these recordings, anyone fair would at least have to stop and listen. Maera noticed some of my new habits. She saw the binders on the shelf, the way I kept my laptop screen angled away from her, the way I wrote short lines in my notebook after difficult conversations. One evening in the kitchen, she laughed and said I was building a case like a lawyer, and that it was sad. She told me that if I used any of this against her, she would make sure no one ever believed me, and that her parents would help her keep Ilias where he belonged. I asked where she thought that was. She answered that it was with the stable parent, the one who did not obsess, and that everyone already knew who that was. Her words were sharp, but her hands shook a little when she picked up her mug. I saw then that she felt something too, not guilt perhaps, but the first little edge of fear that she might have pushed too far. I did not reply with threats. I simply said that I was not interested in shouting matches anymore. I told her, in a calm and level voice, that I was done arguing in kitchens, garages, and family restaurants. I said I would handle everything properly, through the right channels, and that she would be informed when decisions were made. She rolled her eyes and told me I was bluffing, that I lived on my spreadsheets and would never actually act. While she spoke, my laptop was still open on the desk behind me. A small notification appeared in the corner of the screen, showing that several files had just finished uploading to my cloud account. It said, "File uploaded successfully," and listed the name as a simple date and time. To her, it was just a glowing corner of light. To me, it was the sound of a door opening somewhere far ahead, a door she did not yet know existed. I washed my mug, placed it back on my side of the counter, and went to sleep in the guest bed, listening to the hum of the house and the faint sound of her phone buzzing with new messages in the other room. The morning I finally moved from preparation to action arrived quiet and gray, with a low sky that matched the color of the courthouse stone. I woke earlier than usual, made breakfast for Ilias, and told Maera simply that I had some errands to run after dropping him at school. She barely looked up from her phone, where Petra's name glowed on the screen above a line about keeping control of the narrative. I walked my son to the school gate, knelt to straighten his jacket, and reminded him that I would pick him up at the usual time. He hugged me and asked if we were done being angry at each other yet at home. I told him we were working on something that would make things calmer for him, and that he did not have to fix anything himself. Then I watched him run toward the school doors, his backpack bouncing. From there, I took a bus to the courthouse district, sitting near the window and watching the city slide by. When I entered the building, I passed through the metal detectors like any other person with business there, my thin household folder tucked under my arm. Inside, the lobby rang with footsteps and low voices. I met a legal professional there, a calm person who had read my notes in advance and listened without rushing as I went over the timeline using the same simple words I had used in my spreadsheets. There were no raised voices, no shocked gasps. There were only questions about dates, about the child's routine, and about what I wanted to protect. I said I wanted a divorce and a clear custody schedule that would keep fights away from Ilias. I said I wanted temporary orders in place so no one could use sudden changes in living arrangements or money as weapons. The person nodded and pointed to lines where I needed to sign. I read each line twice, not because I doubted, but because I wanted to feel the weight of each word. When I finished, I handed the folder over and watched as it disappeared behind a desk where papers are stamped and entered into systems. I did not feel triumph. I felt something cooler and more stable, like a floor under my feet after standing too long on shifting ground. Later that day, I sat back at my work desk as if it were any other afternoon. I answered emails, fixed a routing error, and spoke with Ro about a delivery delay. On my phone, a small reminder popped up silently. Lobby, 3:00 p.m. I knew that at some point before that hour, the documents I had signed would move through invisible channels and become official enough to be carried in an envelope by someone whose job was to hand them to the right person. I did not need to see every step. I only needed to be ready for the last one. At 2:45, I told Ro I was stepping down to the lobby to take a short call. He nodded, grateful that my life seemed under control, and returned to his screen. I took the elevator down, feeling my own reflection in the stainless steel doors staring back at me. In the lobby, I chose a bench near the windows where I could see both the street entrance and the security desk with its busy printer. The afternoon light came in pale and slanting, turning the floor tiles into a soft checker of gray and white. A man and a woman argued quietly near the elevators about something work-related, while a courier signed a form at the front desk. Near the revolving doors, a neutral-looking man stood holding a plain envelope. He glanced at me once, and I gave the smallest nod. We did not need to speak. It was not my role to hand anything over. My role was only to witness. My phone buzzed before 3 with a message from Maera, saying she was coming by to talk because she did not like the tone I had used in the kitchen the night before. She added that Petra was on the line and wanted to hear my excuses herself. I typed back that I was in the lobby of my office building if she wanted to come there, because I would not have another argument at home. A few minutes later, the glass doors rotated, and she stepped into the lobby, her hair still perfect from the salon, her eyes flashing with the confidence of someone who believes the story is in her hands. She walked toward me quickly, her phone held out like a small shield in front of her, Petra's voice loud on the speaker telling her to stay firm. Before she reached me, the neutral man stepped away from the door and moved into her path. He called her full name in a clear voice, checking her face against whatever information he carried. She frowned and asked who he was and why he was talking to her. He said he had documents for her, that he needed to confirm her identity, and that his task would be finished once she accepted the envelope. Petra's voice on the phone grew sharper, asking what was happening and telling her not to sign anything. The man did not ask her to sign. He only placed the papers in her hand after she said yes to her own name. Behind them, at the security station, a printer started to spool, its mechanical whirring filling the quiet lobby. The sound reminded me of the blank page my own printer had once pushed out in the middle of the night when I tested it after organizing my binders. Maera looked down at the envelope, then up at me. Her face changed as she read the first line visible through the thin paper, the one that contained both our names and the words "petition for dissolution" and references to temporary orders regarding property and custody. For a long second, no one spoke. The printer hummed, someone laughed softly near the elevator, a door opened and closed in the distance. Petra shouted through the phone, asking what the papers said, but Maera did not answer her. She just stared at me with a mixture of anger and disbelief, as if I had broken some unspoken rule by refusing to stay in my assigned role as the quiet, forgiving man. I did not gloat or apologize. I simply told her, in the same calm tone I had used in our kitchen, that I would communicate through the proper channels from now on, and that everything in those pages was about protecting our son and making sure the fighting stayed away from him. She opened her mouth to say something, but the words did not come out yet. The envelope shook slightly in her hand, and the light from the lobby windows turned its edges almost translucent. I watched the moment land on her, heavy and unavoidable, watched the story she had built about a jealous husband and a harmless kiss collide with the weight of formal action. In that instant, I finally felt the ground under my feet turn solid, and the noise of rumors fade behind the simple fact that, for once, everyone in the room could see the same truth at the same time.